Happy New Year, everybody. We are recording this in the early hours of the morning, and Hannah, my partner, is here, and she will be filtering through all the comments and questions. So if you have any, please send them through to her. And we've already been inundated, so she's going to do the best that she can, and she'll send them through to me to answer as we go along. So today's report probably needs not much of an introduction, but there will be a few people that aren't aware of what we're doing. So in short, both myself and Hannah ventured into the sewers of New York City to meet, as they're very colloquially known, the sewer people of New York, and to have a look around at what they've created down there. Now, we understand that given the nature of this particular topic and the proximity of this to New York City, that there's going to be a number of people that try to go in there. Now, we need to be very firm about this, that this is an absolute disclaimer. Please do not, under any circumstances, go into the sewers. Please do not even go in the proximity of them. In fact, just having spoken to my manager before, that the NYPD are now looking at blocking off the one known entranceway. Previously, this had of course been open, and a few brave individuals had gone there and taken photos during daylight hours, and I wouldn't say it was a tourist attraction, but it was certainly known, and a few people went there. Now, my understanding is that this is now being blocked off, or is being in the process of being blocked off. So, but we need to really make that quite clear, that please do not, under any circumstances, go in there or even try to go in there. And while a lot of our experiences down there were, I guess, quite rosy, we need to be quite clear that there is the possibility that, and we will be elaborating on this as we go along, that what myself and Hannah witnessed under there was, I guess for lack of a better term, propaganda. We were kind of potentially shown a manipulated and very contrived version of what takes place under there. Now, this may not have even been the case, but we do need to make that quite clear, that even though the things we're going to be describing and what we witnessed were very positive things, we need to be at the same time objective and outline to people that what we encountered is completely different to what other people may encounter if they try to go under there. That's why we need to be very clear about this very early on. And on that note, we can begin with, I guess, why did we go under there? And I guess for me and Hannah, that we've been all around the world and we've interviewed a lot of people who I guess you could describe them as being very eccentric people, very important people, very different people, very dangerous people in a lot of circumstances, in a lot of dangerous places. And why then did we feel the need to go under there and to try to figure out what's been happening under there? And I think for me and a lot of other people growing up, we grew up with all the bedtime stories about it, and we grew up hearing the rumors about alligators in the sewers of New York City. We grew up reading the articles in the newspapers and online and reading all these things that I felt that as a reporter, that with the platform that I have, I felt that myself and Hannah that we could be the best candidates to break the story and to really investigate it. And that's what we did. And so it all started, I guess, when I raised the possibility of going under there with my manager and agent, and the immediate response was a very, very overwhelming no. Like, it was out of the question, and there was a number of reasons why. But however, when you put them in the scheme of things, it's almost laughable. For example, one of the main issues was that we couldn't get insurance. Now, we'd been all around the world. We've been in dangerous places, interviewing warlords, vicious dictators, but yet we couldn't get insurance company to cover us going to a place in New York City. We couldn't get any security. Again, we can get security to go and see a warlord, but we can't get security to follow us into a sewer in New York City. We couldn't get a cameraman. We couldn't get sound people. We couldn't, as we'll describe later on, we couldn't even get... Well, we had to fight to get a driver to even take us within a few blocks of the alleyway. So there was a number of logistical problems that we faced before we even set off. And so when I brought it up with my manager, it was very, very swiftly struck down, written off, and dead and buried. And it bugged me. I felt absolutely compelled to do this story, and I think of all the things that were working against it, even taking place, that I absolutely felt every part of me, that in the reporter DNA that's ingrained in me and Hannah as well, that we felt we needed to go in there. And I said to my manager, look, forget it. If something happens to us, life insurance, it doesn't matter. Like we're going under there, and we're going to see what we can see, and we're going to do what we can do, and everything else will just take care of itself. And I mean, he was irreparable, understandably so, but so we started planning it, and I had to be very careful planning. This is a very unknown place, and the decision was made very early on that we made the decision that we wouldn't be taking any crew down there. Before the uncertainty that we faced, there was no way that we were going to go under there with the whole entourage, security men, sound people, the likes. This was going to be very, very bare bones. It was going to be me and Hannah going under there with no cameras, no microphones, no dictaphones, not even a pad and pen, no technology, no nothing. Absolutely bare bones reporting. And Hannah just sent for the first question, which ties in very, very nicely. How do we know that you're telling the truth? Thank you very much for a very, very direct question. How do you know that we're telling the truth? You don't know. That's it. But look, our track record speaks for itself, and the things that we are reporting, I think there's too much there that is going to be noted and seen in the future, and there's just too much overwhelming evidence in that more people are going to discover these things in the years, and well, not even the years, probably the months to come. And I think that it's all just going to come out in drips and drabs, and that's the way that they want it to happen. And another question has come in now. Why didn't you take just even a photograph? Look, we didn't take anything in, and I've said that before, that we needed to show them, and we're going to explain that when we go through this sequentially. But it's not as simple as just going into the sewer, and it's in my opinion that on the way in there that there's a lot of filtering and screening going on, and if we were going in there with items that even a camera or a microphone or anything like this, that we simply wouldn't have been allowed in. I honestly believe that. And the other thing that I think it's very prudent to mention to people at the moment, that many years ago I had a one-on-one interview with Mickey Mackay, who is the famous New York business person, he was very young at the time that I interviewed him, who we won't go into all the controversies, but he more or less disappeared, not only from the public view, but nobody saw him, nobody has seen him for a number of years now, and obviously there's been the rumors that he had gone enter the sewers, and that he was one of the instrumental figures in the rapid expansion of it. And that's something that I can just put out there now, that uh, we did meet Mickey Mackay under there, and I guess that's why we were good candidates to go under there, because of my previous correspondence with Mickey. I was one of the few people to actually interview him when he was still in the public eye, and um, but even still, because obviously at the time we didn't know that he was under there, that we were going into a very, very uncertain place, and we needed to show them that we were no threat, that we didn't have any weapons, or we weren't trying to showcase them to the world. That I don't know if you guys read much science fiction novels, but there's always this theory that like an alien civilization would very, very slowly showcase themselves to humanity, and it's not going to be this big curtain raising reveal. And from our experience down there, we were of the view that this was just the very first revealing of themselves to the outside world. And people are going to say, well, you just take one photograph and that's the end of it. But look, we did what we did, and we've gotten the story that we've gotten, and I don't regret not taking anything else under there. And so myself and Hannah arrived in New York City on the Thursday evening, with the plan to go into the sewer on very late on the Friday evening, and this actually transpired on schedule. So now New York City at this juncture was in a period of both political and economic instability. It was very chaotic. We took a walk on the Thursday evening just around Manhattan, and very, very uneasy tension all throughout the city. It was very, very clear and palpable, and there was a number of riots taking place. There was notable skirmishes taking place amongst political rivals, and something that we hadn't seen in a long time in New York City, and that's just the number of homeless people had skyrocketed. It was a time where homeless people had more or less been shunted away and effectively banned from being in the city, but very, very chaotic. And this was all, of course, taking place with the knowledge that we would be going into the sewer the following evening. And I have to be honest with you that it was probably the least prepared I've ever been for any report in my entire career, and there really was nothing that we could do to prepare for it. We did a little bit of research and try to piece together some of the jigsaw pieces of different accounts and reports, but a lot of these kind of contradicted each other, and essentially we just said that we're going to have to wing it. And it's more or less what we did, and I guess that was the way it had to be. So anyway, it gets to the Friday evening, and we have another question now, which is, were we scared? And the answer, very simply, to that is yes. Although I don't remember being particularly worried about this until we just were leaving the hotel. Up to this moment, I think it just it just hadn't hit me or Hannah, and just the magnitude of what we were undertaking, and it just became a very real reality at this point. And I just remember as we were leaving the hotel room, just this overwhelming sense of I don't want to say it was panic, but it was just concern and worry, and I wasn't so much worried for myself, but I was thinking that taking Hannah into this dangerous place with no security, what would happen if she had been captured, or they'd gone after her, or there's a million things that go through your mind. And I said to her as we were going the down the elevator, I said to her that I don't know if I can take you down there. I don't know if anything happened to you, that if I could live with myself. And Hannah, being the ultimate professional that she is, was noticeably unimpressed by this, and I remember her answer was very short and sweet, and it was more or less, "We got this." And after that sentence from her, I knew that we were going to be fine. And here we were on this strange and peculiar night, beginning our search for Mickey Mackay, the man who used to run basically New York City, a man who had become yesterday's news, a man who had a warrant out for his arrest the last time that I had checked, a man who, for all intents and purposes, could have been lying at the bottom of the Hudson River right now, but a man that had been, with all these rumors and all these myths, potentially running this underground world, and we had to find it out for ourselves. So we began our search into the sewers to see these mythical sewer people and whether they existed or not, and to see if all these nightmare bedtime fables had been created by parents to scare their children, if there was any truth to them at all. This had all started with a few stray rumors many, many years ago, a few sightings every once in a blue moon, and over time the legend had grown, the evidence becoming more and more overwhelming with each and every day. The mayor of New York City refuses to even acknowledge the rumors, pretends like nothing at all is happening down there. The police, the NYPD, do not dare go anywhere near the sewers for fear of opening up Pandora's box. The rumors growing stronger, that the sewer people were themselves getting stronger with effort every day, and the rumors that they were going to rise up and take back the city we wanted to go in there and see how much of this, if any of it, was true at all. So here we were now outside the hotel, and it was a very unnaturally silent New York City night. I remember the street was completely devoid of people, and a slight fog had descended down, and it gave a very ominous feel to the city. The fog blurred out the skyline. It was just a very foreboding mood. So the first problem that we had was, of course, trying to get a driver to actually take us there. And I mean, it's hard enough for us to even try to flag down a cab. Our first few efforts were in vain, almost comically speaking. So I remember having great difficulty even getting a taxi cab to pull over to the side of the road, and Hannah soon gave me a lesson in what she apparently had accumulated over the years, which was experience in flagging down New York City taxi cabs, which supposedly required out of this world assertiveness, which in other words means that you basically have to put your life on the line by playing in traffic and almost getting hit. But she managed to successfully get a few taxis to pull over to the side of the road, but that was just the first step, and that was what we were soon to see was the easiest step, trying to explain to these taxi drivers that we wanted to go to the unnamed district of New York City, which, for the people who aren't familiar with this, is where the district where the infamous alleyway is located. So anyway, to cut a long story short, we did manage to finally get a taxi driver to take us there, and he was very handsomely tipped. Let's just say that we paid the tip up front as well. But he was a very nice man, but he spent the entirety of the journey there warning us over and over and over again about the imminent doom that was to befall us momentarily. I remember him saying that no good person ever walked out of the unnamed district alive, and he very much promised us that we wouldn't be an exception to that rule. And so anyway, I remember we were driving towards the district, and the surrounding area just became noticeably seedier and desolate. Onwards we drove past all these sordid tenements, these damp, squalid streets, and we were in the heart of working class New York. And as I mentioned, this was very much a period of both economic and political instability, and right here in the heart of working class New York, it was very much the epicenter point of this economic downfall, and it was very, very prominent. Now I've got a question here which I'll take quickly, and it said, what time did you guys go in and what time did you guys get out? And not that we were particularly time tracking all of this. There was a lot going on, as you'll know, but roughly we left the hotel around 10 p.m. and by the time that we had been let out of the sewers, it was around 4 a.m. So you do the math. It wasn't, an all exclusive tour, but it was certainly enough time for us to really get a good gauge of what was going on down there. And so, yeah, it was from around 10 p.m. that we left. It was around 4 in the morning. I remember checking our clock as we were as we were let out of the sewer. One thing that people find interesting is that while the times that I just mentioned before are Eastern Standard Time, to my knowledge, that's not used in the sewer, and they use the Greenwich time or the UDC time, which is quite interesting, I guess. But yeah, so Eastern Standard Time is not relevant down there. So there you go, there's a little wee fun fact for you. So our driver took us within a block of the alleyway, which is a block closer than what we had asked him to do. And then in a very gracious act, he had even offered to give us back all the money that we'd offered him, on the pretext that he didn't want to take money from dead people, which is what he saw that we were at this point in time. But we wouldn't, we couldn't take the man's money. We outright refused, and he drove off. And yes, it was a very gracious driver, and he just made what was potentially a very, very fingernail biting experience a lot less so. And I will never forget that driver, that's for sure. So now we were within a block of the alleyway, and we slowly made our way there towards the famous alleyway. Not a person was in sight in any direction. The only sound was the incessant howl of dogs in the surrounding neighborhood, which just would not stop. And it was then that the reality of the isolation of no man's land, New York City, finally hit me like a ton of bricks. So we were stood now in front of the alleyway at the very beginning of it, where a few brave tourists would take photos and the like during the daylight hours, but very few would frequent in the vicinity of that area at any point during after sundown. But I remember making a joke to Hannah. Well, I didn't even do it intentionally, but I was just, I guess, in the nervousness of it all, started to give her a history of the alleyways of New York, and just advising her that this was the last of its kind in New York City. For all the other alleyways disappeared over the years to clear more and more space, and space being lack of space being the biggest premium that there is in New York City. And Hannah's response was again quite blunt, and she said, "We're on death's door and you're talking about fucking alleyways, really?" So I think I just continued with my little wee history lesson and said that no construction worker in the world would dare set foot in that alleyway. And there we were, standing in front of the fucking alleyway. And so we start to slowly move down the alleyway, almost as though every step that we took was about to set off a booby trap, or it was almost as though it was something from Indiana Jones, and the walls of the alleyway are just cluttered, absolutely cluttered in warnings, and not just in English, in every language imaginable, including some that I've never seen in my life. Um, I couldn't make out the characters of the writing, so I don't even know what language it was, but I could only assume it was a language of of the occupants potentially. But and out of nowhere at all, Hannah uh, thought that she saw a moving shadow on the catwalk above the alleyway, and they would just cut through the night as quick as lightning. And um, I found out, well, she didn't say at the time, but I found out later that she thought it was one of the many vigilante of New York. As you know, there's a lot going around, and they dress up and they patrol the streets. And this particular vigilante was, funnily enough, dressed up as Batman. So I only found that out when we left later. But so yeah, I took her hand and we walked down very slowly. Um, as I say, the walls are just absolutely just littered in warnings and all kinds of uh, drawings and paintings of horrific things. And I can see at the end of the alleyway that there's this emerald green smoke just billowing out from the sewer, and just this rising bloom of smoke, and there's no way to see beyond it. And the walls of the alleyway get very very narrow as we walk further down. So the netting on the side of the alleyways narrows and narrows, and so much so that you reach a point where you can only really walk in single file. And so as we're about to walk through the rising smoke, we take note of one final warning, which I'll never forget. And it's just in English at the top of the alleyway. Well, at the very end of the alleyway, I should say, is the warning: "We are the people your parents warned you about." So I'll never forget that. That's just at the very top, and it's the last thing you see as you begin to enter the sewer world. And I should point out as well that if you have any questions about the vigilante, then please direct them to Hannah, because I didn't see him. But he was apparently on top of the catwalk, and if he was there, then it's very noble of him, and I guess it was reassuring to know that this random guy dressed up as Batman was looking out for us. So that's reassuring. So we've now passed through the smoke, and we're walking through this, describe it as a decaying, claustrophobic corridor. And there's very little light in this room. The only light, in fact, comes from a strip of green LED light. It just runs along the side of the corridor. And if you can picture this, there's this very airy background music. I don't know where it was coming from, but it's being played through these speakers that we can't see in the darkness, and I have no idea what song it was, or if it was even an actual noted song, or but it being edited beyond all recognition, and um, had been slowed down, and they're probably been playing backwards, which gave it this very distinctive garble sound, and it was just horrific. It was like a demon growling or chanting, and I just had the thought that this would be the elevator music that they play as you go into as you're going down the elevator into hell itself when you die, and before you meet the Grim Reaper. I mean, it was just terrifying, absolutely terrifying, and um, so we just walked through this corridor. Now, so I've gotten permission from Hannah to say this, that she's fine for this to go on the record, but it was around about this point that she had a panic attack, and this was the closest that we came to leaving. And to be fair, it was probably the last opportunity to actually leave the sewer. I just remember her saying that we've got it all wrong, and this is a place of death, and that we're marching to our death. And I don't think, even if she could have run, she physically, I don't think she could. She was just paralyzed in terror. And to be fair, I wasn't much better. And it's quite blurry what actually happened and how we managed to carry on, but it was just the reality of it finally was hitting us particularly hard, to say the very least. So anyway, we lumber forward slowly while this demon choir plays out. But the horrors just continue, because further down we start to see this silhouetted figure who just emerges. And this is... we don't get the impression that this is a benevolent... whatever it is, it's not benevolent. And perhaps because it was the green LED light, but the silhouetted figure almost appeared alien in appearance. It was just uncanny. But we're resolute, and we just continue forward. And even though we're completely ridden with panic, we slowly just increase our resolve, and I guess we were rewarded for our bravery in the end, because the figure we never saw him or her or whatever it was again, and it was lost in the darkness. So we follow the corridor to the very end, and I can't even tell you how long we had to trudge forward for, but we finally reached the end. We're in this very, very small room, and it's completely and utterly covered in ivy. And in the center of the room is this very, very old-fashioned water well. And on the back wall is a stretch flag of magnificent green and yellow, and it's just draped on the wall, covering most of it, on top of the ivy. And underneath the flag is writing in the strange language that we'd seen before when we were walking down the alleyway. So, and I remember Hannah called out, "It's a dead end. Where do we go? It's a dead end." And so I looked at her, and then I looked at the darkened abyss below in the water wall, and I said to her, "There's only one thing to do now, and that's we have to go into the sewer itself." And I said, "I'll go first, and I'll be here with you every step of the way." And with that, just slowly lowering ourselves down into the darkness. And there's a ladder that just lines the wall of the well, and we just go slowly down, venturing into a fucking sewer. It's just the most unreal experience ever. And so we climb the wall-mounted ladder all the way to the bottom of the sewer. When we reach the bottom, it's still very dark. Very little light. What we can see is that lining the bottom of the sewer is this very bright green, ankle-deep liquid. And to this day, I don't know what it was, but you think of nuclear waste, or perhaps something even worse than nuclear waste. So I remember saying to Hannah that there's basically no way back now. We've gone too far. And I remember using the analogy that we were like the first people to go to South America. And when they went there with their armies, and they burnt the boats once the army had landed, and the idea being that they'd burned all their bridges now, and there was no way to go back, so the armies would fight more resiliently. And Hannah's reaction was that hopefully the sewer people mistake us for gods as well, because the alternative just doesn't bear thinking about. So anyway, we continue forward very slowly again, and just every little step that we take, we just think it's going to set off some kind of booby trap. And it's just this labyrinth. It's like a sprawling catacomb, and the further you go, the more and more you realize the exit is just simply impossible. So we go deeper and deeper and deeper, and then we find ourselves in this narrow, mundane corridor, another corridor, but this one's a little different because we can hear the sound of electrical currents flowing, and it was like some kind of abandoned power plant, some kind of underground abandoned power plant. And the further we go in, the more overbearing the sound is, and this corridor twists and turns, and the eerie sound of the flowing electricity just continues on and on and on, and then all of a sudden we hear what sounds like another human voice, and our directions are just absolutely distorted. I don't know where we are. We don't know where the sound is coming from, whether it's in front of us, behind us, in another room to the side of us. I remember Hannah screamed out in terror, and all of a sudden we hear this big bang behind us, and we turn around, and it's like the room that we just came through shut completely, and we were sealed in. And it was in this moment that even in even in the most optimistic view, there really was I thought that was the end. I thought we was done for. So there we were, trapped in the darkness, the lowest of the lows, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's this very, very faint light that just is cast, and then we can make out where we are, and we're in this very large circular room, and it's shaped like a well, but a massive, massive well. And anyway, the highest point of the room is a glass roof, and we can see very faintly that there's a body of water outside. Now, we have no idea where we are or how far we've come, but we can only imagine that it's the Long Island Sound, or it was the Hudson, or it was some kind of water body close to New York City. So, as we contemplate this for the briefest of moments, all of a sudden, this powerful stream of water just starts flowing into the room from various different entrance points, and it's just flowing in, filling up the room at a rapid pace. If you've ever seen, I guess a good analogy would be the Titanic when it had been hit by the iceberg. The first few compartments, just the water flowing in at this rapid pace. And once again, we think that we're done. We're absolutely doomed, and we're literally going to drown at the bottom of the Hudson or the bottom of the Long Island Sound, and it's just absolutely horrifying. And then out of nowhere at all, a compartment in the very center, literally in the center of the room, flips over, and there's a dinghy. And I mean, you couldn't script this. There's just, I mean, we can't believe it. We literally sprint to this dinghy, and just the adrenaline that we're feeling, you just can't ever measure it. It's just, it's hard to explain it. Anyway, we rush to this dinghy and we sit in it. Oh, this room fills up with water. And Hannah's crying. She's absolutely crying. And I don't think I said anything. I don't think either of us said anything. As this boat rises up, as the room floods with water, we have no idea what these people are doing, or what they plan to do to us, or what the point of any of this is. And you try to rationalize and use logic, but you're in another world, and there's just nothing you can do. And anyway, the boat continues to rise and rise and rise, and then all of a sudden the flooding stops. It just completely and utterly stops, and we just sat there in this dinghy, and there's just dead silence. And then we can see, almost straight ahead of us, in the faintness of the darkness, there's an opening in one of the walls, and it might be a good 40 feet away from us. And I guess prior to the flooding, it was probably 40 feet on top of us. And it was only later that we were able to rationalize and try to understand what had actually transpired. But it's in my opinion that this served as some kind of security measure, and it was functioned much like a canal key that you see a lot in England and in parts of Europe. It's quite common. It was certainly common hundreds of years ago. They're still around, and not indoors though, but similar function. But except that we're using this as a security measure, not as a way of transport. And it's in my opinion that if we were a threat, then the digging wouldn't have revealed itself, and we would have drowned down there. We would never have been able to reach this opening that was, 40 feet above us. And the only way we were able to do it, obviously, was with the water and the small boat, and with the permission of the sewer people. So anyway, we just sit there, just frozen in terror and all these things. And once we kind of collect ourselves, we slowly start to row towards this opening, because there's certainly no other way. There's no way back now, and we don't have any oars or anything, so we're just literally just rowing with our hands. But we don't get that much momentum, but we start to see that the boat is almost moving freely towards the opening, almost by itself. So it's being drawn there by like a magnet. And we don't even begin to contemplate what's next, because how the hell could you? How could anybody contemplate what was going to happen next? But the next sound I hear is Hannah screaming, and the reason she's screaming is because we're now speeding downward at a very rapid pace. And what had happened was that, in quite an incredible feat of engineering, the very small boat had locked onto a track which was being drawn towards, and this track which was at the opening that we'd seen, and we were now very much, in all honesty and all truth, we were essentially riding a roller coaster. As we fall into the darkness, deeper and deeper, bend after bend, stomach churning. It's got nothing on Six Flags. It's got nothing on what we experienced. Just drop after drop, all in the pitch black darkness. We can't see anything, or where we are, but we're going down. And so the track finally reaches the end of its line, and it just stops. And we look out around us, and here we are in this underground cabin. And it's lit by this almost like radiant ocean blue light. And we look around us, and there's spectacular rock formations just surrounding us, and there's water crashing from like an overhead crevice. It's just falling in strong torrents into the darkened undergrowth below us. And we get out of this boat / roller coaster / vehicle, and we just tread forward into this, taking in this enchanting natural beauty around us. And Hannah just says, how deep underground are we? And I didn't have an answer. I think I just said, forget everything that you know about the life above us, because we're in for one hell of a shock. We're in a completely different world now. So the chamber narrows out, and then we pass underneath this huge archway, which has been built into the opening in the chamber. And I remember etched into the stone at the very top of the arch was a quote, and it's written in English. And the quote was, "The brave never run." And we pass through the arch, and then we descend toward a dramatic entrance hall below us, and we do so via a restored functional escalator. That's right, literally an escalator. And as we go down slowly, I take note of a portrait of a man we're very familiar with, a man that we interviewed once, and there's no mistaking him. His youthful looks, the distinctive eyebrows, and that toothy grin. It's the portrait of Mickey Mackay. And when I saw that portrait for the first time since we left the hotel, I wasn't in shock or disbelief, because the realization had just dawned upon me that this was all believable now. I could believe everything that I saw because I knew that this man was behind it in all his brilliance, and all the horror and all the uncertainty that we'd faced was just alleviated, was just eliminated in full. And so anyway, we reached the end of the escalator, and we just slowly make our way through this deserted entrance hall. It looks like it should be in a airport or something. And there's a series of stretched flags that hang from just below the ceiling. And the thing that is really incredible was that the entire ceiling was comprising of this mesmerizing stained glass window, and it just gave the impression to the room that there was almost like a permanent sunset that's just been cast down upon the hall, and it was just absolutely unreal. And as we're walking slowly through this hall and just taking in the sunset in the sewer, just sounds ridiculous even saying it, but this amazing sunset that's been created with the stained glass ceiling. And then Hannah kind of gives me a jab, and I turn around, and there we see in one of the corners of the room a very young couple. And it's the first sign of life, the first sign of the sewer people. And we stand there because they're basically making out. They're just making out in the corner of the room, and the two lovers' eyes never leave each other. There's no dialogue. I don't think they even saw us. And as bizarre as it sounds, we just kept walking, and we just kept walking through the hall. And at which point the entrance hall just opens up, and it reveals this massive elaborate room, which is far larger than than a indoor football arena. It just stretches as far as the eye can see, and this imposing room is just an absolute hub of activity, and there's just people everywhere interacting. It's just this massive free-flowing marketplace, and I looked at Hannah and she looked back and we didn't say anything, but it was like, we're in the sewer now, we're with the sewer people. So I'll just take a break from my soliloquy for a second because we have an absolute flood of questions coming through about the sewer people, and I'm going to try to, hopefully I can answer most of them by just going through briefly describing what we saw. But the sewer people obviously were almost exclusively youthful. Some of them had small babies, and there was a few toddlers running around. But other than that, almost everyone, I would say, would be aged from late teens to early 30s. What they wore, the fashion of the sewer people was, I would not say trend setting, and while it wasn't completely Soviet inspired, it was by no means cutting edge either. And say they wore pretty bland clothes, but the redeeming feature was that they all placed UV painting, a UV paint across their clothes and different designs, and the modesty of the clothing was spruced up as a result. And some of them had messages and symbols on their clothing, and it wasn't just on the clothes either, because it seems that down there, see with the dim lighting, the UV paint was as important as anything else down there, because it was used for many different purposes, like some forms of advertising, the street signs. So, but yeah, they had UV paint which they used to make the clothing a bit more memorable. And if the clothing was mundane, then the footwear was extravagant, because they almost all wore high value sneakers, when they seemed to all place incredible emphasis on brightness and style, as though they were all out competing each other in terms of audacity. But they also obviously very pale people. It's not much natural light down there. What language do they speak? Most of them spoke English, and I'd say almost a dialect of English. Some words that we didn't recognize, and this was to say as well, not that we really spoke to them. It sounds almost bizarre to say that, but once we were in that big room, we walked through the marketplace. Nobody kind of stopped us. Nobody really interacted with us. We got a few nods and some friendly gestures, but nobody stopped and had a conversation with us. It was almost like we had a cloak of invisibility on us as we strolled through the world. But yeah, there was just a very real communal feel down there, and just very good natured chemistry that just radiated across the society. And it certainly wasn't this cauldron of psychopaths and drug addicts and convicts or anything else that the media and the authorities had labelled them. It wasn't a place of no return. It wasn't a death trap to anyone foolish enough to go in there or even linger in the vicinity of it. And it certainly wasn't the nightmare inducing bedtime stories that we've grown up hearing as small children. It just wasn't this. I mean, it was a model society in many ways, created by the damned, the people of the damned. People had given up on the terminally ill world above us and had ventured downward in the belief that they could and that they would do better. So we have a question: what ethnicities were the Sewa people? They were all ethnicities. There was white people, black people, Asian, Latino, Native American, they were all down there. A rainbow sewer, if you will. Rainbow sewer people. And another question: how bright was it down there? Well, I was going to say that before that. So this massive free-flowing marketplace that we'd walked into had this, it was like a Gothic ribbed vaulted ceiling, which kind of served to enhance the incredible vastness of the room that we were in. But I guess the only real light was this kind of ghostly blue light that just kind of lit up the cavernous room, and there was some candlelight, and it wasn't pitch black, but it wasn't exactly Times Square either. But I guess so. There we were, just walking through, exploring this marketplace with rows and rows of stalls distributing basically everything that you could imagine, from meats and produce to spices and literature to cosmetics. Anything you could name, they were distributing it in some manner. And we just passed through this marketplace absolutely dumbfounded at what we were seeing. And one thing I will never forget is we passed what you would almost call a food court of sorts, and there was what the Sewa people's take on McDonald's was, essentially, with locals fraternizing in high spirits, eating their version of fast food, if you will. I mean, it didn't take us long to get lost down there either. We were down a fairy lit laneway, and then there was some locals talking, earnestly and to their kindred spirits in these open air restaurants and bars completely and utterly devoid of any barriers or liquor laws, and liquor laws were not in place down there from what I could see. I remember we passed two men that were smoking, and one of them actually nodded to me, and it was quite a surreal moment. And part of me knew that this man that had nodded to me was almost as though he was in on it, and like an actor that had broken script and broken the fourth wall, and just got the impression that he knew more than we knew, more than he let on. But we continued on, passing through this bustling society like weary-eyed tourists, stopping frequently to gaze just in astonishment some of the architectural feats that were surrounding us, and I'll name some of them now, but there was almost too many to list. And we passed a very well populated skate park, which was conjoined to a basketball court where several games of social basketball were taking place. And in the background of this park, there was artificial turf and artificial trees. It was complete and utter park, but it was underground. And I don't know what time, how late it was, or how early it was in the morning, but there was stained glass ceiling which had been, designed and painted in such a manner that it appeared as though it was lunchtime on a cloudless day permanently. Just absolutely unbelievable. And we passed an underground canal, which I guess served as the sewer people's take on public transport. And one of the boats was actually departing when we were at the canal station, and the captain rang the bell and they cast off from the docking station. And I remember seeing the boat had a sign on it which said Eastern Suburbs, which, as we watched that boat ride off in the placid waters, soon lost in the darkness of a tunnel, one could only imagine how far this sewer world stretched. Eastern Suburbs, how far did the suburbia of the sewers go? I remember we were walking away from the station, and there was a lone street performer playing at the station, and the musicians' passion for their music was very, very evident, because there was absolutely no collection hat whatsoever, no form of collection, just playing completely and utterly for the passion of the music. I remember we kept walking and we saw a big sparkling man-made lagoon, and just surrounded by tropical plants, and there were locals swimming in the lagoon. Others were lying in the white sand that surrounded the lagoon, and I'll never ever forget this sight. But Hannah actually laughed out loud at it. There's a couple of young women in their beach get-ups, and they were turning over in the sand, so that almost as though they were sunbathing underground. And you could only laugh at this image. Just incredible scenes. And we kept walking on, and we passed through a concert which was taking place in a dimly lit beer hall. When we struggled to make our way through this very dense crowd, and there was a band playing on the stage, and they were very, very passionate and completely in sync. And the sewer people were just dancing, just giving it everything that they had. Young couples were making out in the crowd. I remember a young man slid himself onto the stage and just started dancing alongside the band. But as you would see in the outside world, this man would have been absolutely manhandled by security, but it's absolutely non-existent down here. And the band just merely encouraged him to continue on with what he was doing. And we carried on and probably reached the foremost of the spectacular feats, which was situated what I understood to be, and I don't know, but it looks to me as though it was the center of what would have been a fully operational subway station years ago, although it doesn't quite tie in with how far I thought that we were underground. Maybe it had been designed that way. But the remnants of the old subway station remained, but for the most part, the new youthful owners had redecorated audaciously. And there, what would have been the center of the station, was an aquamarine pond of water. And in the water, bioluminescent lights could be sighted. Overhead, pipes of water had been manipulated to create this series of free-flowing waterfalls, and they just flowed at a rapid rate into the elaborate pool below, and we just stood there on the edge of the fence that skirted around this far-reaching waterfall. And the most incredible and memorable sight that we saw was alligators swimming, bathing on the edges of the pond. And I just said to Hannah that the rumors were true. It was them all along, all these old wives' tales of alligators living under New York City, all these myths over the years, all these reports, they were all true. And we just stood there. I don't know how long we stood there for, but we just stood there listening to the sounds of gallons and gallons of water crashing down from above, just taking in this impressive sight with the alligators. And one could only ask, how the hell did they do this? How did they create this work of art